let's get into 0.102 patch notes. It seems like overall there's not a lot of changes, but the ones they did make are very, very big. They said, "Hey Slayers, we got another beta patch for you all this week. Notably, this patch brings in some structural work for a system called badges. Badges may appear at the end of a run, noting various things that happened during a run, like defeating a boss without losing HP, beating the game quickly, specific Easter eggs, or pointing out that you forgot to spend your gold. They're meant as little reminders to let you know what was unique about each adventure. While they only show up at the end of a run for now, they'll appear in your run history and stats screen later on. This is part of a series of upcoming changes to make runs feel distinct and improve scoring. More on that later. In terms of visual changes, there are some new art additions for various cards and a few enemies, as well as some cool new visual effects for afflictions, which I think is really cool because especially smog cards, that was really difficult to be able to tell earlier. So I'm a big fan of a lot of these new arts. Okay, content, what we actually care the most about here. Reworked Ascension 6 from Gloom, less rest sites, to Inflation. Removing cards from your deck at the merchant is more expensive. This is incredibly big. Specifically, your removal starts at 100 gold and now increases per remove by 50 gold instead of 25. So your first few removes are 100, 150, 200 instead of 75, 100, 125. This is really massive. That's a huge change. This is going to make stuff like Regents, who really likes a lot of removes, maybe have to play a bit differently. Overall, I imagine we're going to either be one, more selective with what you pick up to just need less removes, or two, just blowed out decks, similar to what we were doing sort of in Spire 1. I think overall, your first remove is still going to be worth it. After that, it's a lot harder to justify. And you're going to have to make more interesting decisions, at least when it comes to figuring out, do I buy a relic or do I buy a remove? Because now they might actually be very similar prices. So insanely punishing. I think this is definitely a lot bigger than the less rest sites thing. Silent reworked Blade of Ink card. It used to read rare, cost 1, skill. This turn, whenever you play an attack, gain 2 to 3 strength this turn. This was literally never picked. So this was kind of a complete brick card. Literally never wanted it. It never found its way into my deck. And now it says, add 2 to 3 Inky Shivs into your hand. Inky is a new enchantment that says this card deals 2 additional damage and applies 1 week. That is very good. Essentially, what this says now is that you have a card that says 1 skill, 12 damage, apply 2 week, and because there are multiple instances of week, you can get Artifact Strip to go through like the giant robot inside of Act 3. So that's really huge. If you get this really early, you can also spread out where your week goes or place it AoE. Overall, really cool card. And obviously has a lot of Shiv synergies already. There's another thing down below that we'll get to as well. That's some more Shiv buffs, which is pretty cool. Overall, I think Silent honestly just got buffed. I don't know if she needed that. Hopefully the game just gets harder. And there are a few changes that I expect will make the game harder. But overall, this is very strong. I won't say whether or not it's good for the game. I don't really know, but it's incredibly strong as a card now. They said that they wanted to work on experimenting with generated enchanting cards mid-combat, which I think is a cool design space. He says, I suspect this card will be high impact and give Silent another strong weak applier, which I don't know if she needed again, but is very strong. Okay, Necrobinder, reworked Borrowed Time card. It used to read uncommon, costs 0, apply 3 doom to yourself, gain 1 to 2 energy. And now reads 1 cost skill, gain 4 to 6 energy. Cards cost an additional energy this turn. So the first thing I thought of when I saw this was cheating out stuff for Dance Macabre. So I think for people that have been watching my stream recently, they kind of know how much I've gone up on that since buffs. It's already an incredibly strong card, and now you just have Borrowed Time plus Dance Macabre, and all your cards that read 1 on them say 2. Notably, this is more impactful when you can cheat out things that are very expensive. They mentioned Reap and Bury. Reap is already a good card. And so that'll really be nice because going from 3 to 4 is less of an increase than going from 1 to 2 or 0 to 1. Pretty interesting here. Also, you can do some ordering with stuff. So like you can sort of play a few cards that are very cheap and then Later on in the turn, with your last energy, play this, go up to 6, and then cheat out your big Haymaker card that you wanted to actually use all this energy on without really seeing the downside. Pretty cool. Also, Dirge is unaffected by cost modifiers. Obviously, that card exhausts now, so it's going to be a little bit harder to line up with this. But yeah, very, very strong. I don't think you are really doing infinite stuff very often on Necro anymore, regardless of this change. So I think this was mostly directed to sort of kill infinites, but that just wasn't really happening all that much. Notably, I think most decks now are just sort of playing like value loops or blocking a lot per turn. And kind of you can say if I have a Dance Macabre, I just turn everything into a Mental Fortress proc, which is super, super strong. Okay, another really impactful change. Reworked Doormaker. Grass, turn, and power says now attacks for 20 to 23. That's a high ascension modifier. And the power is reworked to whenever you play a card, lose 1 energy. So this used to say the first card you play every turn on that specific turn costs 1 more. And you could really just go in on this turn and sort of just infinite if you really wanted to. Like the way the Doormaker works is you have to like exhaust your deck on turn 1, and then turn 2 you kind of sit there and set up, and then turn 3 you go in. Now they kind of take away any possibility of going in, for lack of a better word. So you don't really have a chance now to just sort of infinite off and like combo. What this really says as well is that Doormaker no longer takes turns off. So you no longer have a cycle to actually survive, block, and then use this one off turn to do damage. What Door is really going to do now is test whether or not your deck can block while also doing output, as well as having this like sort of shrinking deck size issue where you get down to a loop, but you eventually like run out of cards. I think this will be a good test for a lot of decks. I feel like it's very hard to do any sort of looping deck into current Doormaker. I just don't see how you really do it. There's not a turn to go in unless your loop is like Flash of Steel Finesse. So you're going to need like big scaling attacks to actually just kill outright and kill quickly before you run into an issue of just not being able to block. It's not like Heart where it gives you an off turn and you can sort of use that turn to do things. There's no time off in this fight anymore. They're all sort of just strong turns. I suspect this will put this fight way above the others and make it much harder. The only fight that really needs working on is Queen. I feel like the other ones are in kind of a good spot. I do think like the knob sort of tests you a bit in terms of deck output. You need to be able to kill those phases quickly, but I think really this means that none of the Act 3 bosses really want you to just sit there except for Queen, because they just scale too quickly and they'll basically outpace your scaling, whatever you manage to do. So everything kind of turns into a damage race here, but sort of just made your deck building constraints a bit stricter here. It means you have to have output on the turns that you're also blocking. So that's just a unique problem to have to solve. Okay, here's the silent changes that I was mentioning earlier. Buffed Leading Strike. Shivs increase from 1 to 2. Damage decrease from 7 to 3. This is essentially just Blade Dance now. You don't get Shiv synergies on every single hit, but because this by itself now procs 3 attacks, you can proc Ninja Relics with this. You get double dipping on accuracy, double dipping on a lot of the powers, like the retain power that lets you play 1 Shiv a turn, that sort of thing. You play this, you play 1 Shiv, then the next turn you play another. So this is a really, really strong bridge card to just get into Shiv stuff and proc a lot of these multi-hit relics. This alongside, I think the Blade of Ink is going to be extremely impactful. I don't really know why they're buffing Silent. I feel like she's already in a really, really strong spot. This is just like absolutely insane. I think this is super impactful. These other nerfs, they nerf Speedster, damage decrease from 2 to 3 to 1 to 2. I don't think this needed a nerf at all. This card was already not very good. Now it's just probably never getting picked, and you're already not, again, Door is not letting you really cycle to do damage. You can't even draw on 1 turn, and you no longer have a big turn to really go in. So I don't know why these two things are happening at once. Again, it feels like the way that they're balancing and testing things is like super heavy-handed, trying to kill one thing instead of just like a little change here and there. Seems kind of strange to me. I think already with the way they're designing the Door, this thing gets worse. but whatever. Nerfed Untouchable, block decrease from 7 to 9 to 6 to 8. This card is still really strong. Just the way Untouchable works, you're never really playing it for 2 as its actual cost, you're just going to cheat it out. So as a card that you're just cheating out and getting basically +1 draw because you just discard it instead of having to discard another card and, like, for example, play your Deflect, this card is still going to be really strong. This number could say 5 on it and you'd still play it probably. Just in the decks it's going to be good in, this is going to be really good, and obviously scales with decks and does some other stuff. This also, again, cheats through the Sly cost of Door, but the Door is going to sort of punish you, I guess, by making you lose energy. You can still use Prepared to discard this. Still just a really, really strong card. Okay, change History Course Relic. When it plays a copy of an X cost card, it now uses your current energy for its X value instead of the energy spent the last time the card was played. So what this really does is stops you from having like Hot Cocoa using 7 energy on an X cost card and the next turn copying the 7 energy instead of like using your base 3 or 4 or whatever. Overall, not a huge change. This is probably going to behave a little bit more how you would maybe expect it to behave instead of it just being like a thing you have to memorize. Overall, not a huge change. This is already a pretty rare relic and I think a pretty niche interaction anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. Okay, buff Skulking Colony, now attacks on all turns, deals slightly more damage. Base deck versus Skulking Colony. So yeah, okay, it does actually attack. And gain block. So it still gets the block. So you're still gonna be here and it's still gonna go in here as well. This feels a lot more in line, I guess, with what they're trying to do, where it's just a constant test of block. That is a big number, dude. For turn 4? Yeah, this fight's actually going to be quite hard now, I think, without a turn to make progress. It's kind of the same thing as the Door fight, where you really don't have a chance to block and do damage on certain turns. You kind of have to be able to do both at the same time, which is a really rough question to ask, especially when you have to sit here for so long. Minimum, you're gonna be in this fight for 6 turns. 5 full turns where it can hit you, and 6 if you kill it on that turn, if you can get through the shield. What I really expect is that this fight is often going to just be kind of you getting -20, -30. I don't think many decks are going to be able to actually do output at the same time that they're blocking in any meaningful capacity. You just sort of need HP, and you need to be able to trade your HP to do damage. That's really what it is. Okay, Ancients. Buff Nona Pepe's Fur Coat Relic. This is a relic that says all encounters in marked rooms are at 1 HP, and it randomly marks, I think, 7 rooms in the act. Overall, just not a really good relic anyways, but it now affects restocked Axebox and other enemies that enter combat during a fight, so that the entire fight, for example, the like Reptomancer-esque fight that summons a bunch of bots around him, all of those will come in with 1. Not that that matters. I think you're probably killing that guy on 1 HP, but the Axebox fight is probably the main application for this. Okay, events. Nerfed Hungry for Mushrooms event, Fragrant Mushroom option, upgraded cards decreased from 3 to 2. Change Waterlog Scriptorium event, Prickly Sponge option, gold cost lowered from 155 to 99. Tentacle Quill, gold cost lowered from 65 to 55, and buffed Whispering Hollow event, exchange option, gold cost decreased from 50 to 35 plus or minus 9. So I think what this is really trying to do here is account for the fact that you are going to be poorer because of removes. Overall, I like that they made relics more affordable in the previous patch, and then probably make card removes less accessible so they feel more impactful when you get them in events or from your ancients. But I do think this is going to lead to very swingy runs where when you see certain ancient boons, you're going to get a huge increase in power, because really relative to the game, if the game's balanced around the fact that you're not going to have very many removes and you get 4 or 5 removes from your ancients, maybe they still need to tweak that a little bit. those are going to feel really impactful, and they definitely already do, but they'll just feel more impactful now. I do think there's like a critical mass where removes become luxury instead of being actually important. Like once you remove like all your base strikes, removing defense feels a little bit less important than that, and then after that you're really just starting to be picky and remove like cards that are no longer good that you once added. So I think they're really trying to like not have you get to the point where you're just luxury removing everything, and right now that's kind of what you can do. Overall, I think you're still going to be more poor on average, but maybe you're just choosing to spend your money on relics, which again is kind of how Spire 1 ended up looking anyways. Okay, art. Added portrait art for the following cards: Hotfix, modded Synthesis, and Sweeping Gaze. Added new art for Ruby Raiders. Added background art and visual effects for Phantom boss fight. Added new visuals for the following afflictions. Went over these earlier and they're showed up above. Updated empty chest visual effects, smoke puffs. User interface and experience. In general, adjusted and added placeholder assets for score lines in run summary and game over screen. Adjusted timings and pauses for dialogues in Gremlin Merc. Adjusted cultist cacaw dialogue timings. Adjusted speech bubble positions for damp and calcified cultist. All monsters now have distinct speech bubble colors. Players can now navigate between cards, potion relics, and the timeline on lock screen on controller. Players can now navigate to the top bar character portrait to see the Ascension hover tip on controller. Pressing the top bar shortcut while already focusing on a top bar element now moves your controller focus back into your hand. So a lot of controller accessibility changes here. Multiplayer, better handling of intermittent Steam errors, disabled skipping chests in multiplayer. Too many people thought it was the proceed button. Writing. General foul potion description now specifies that it deals damage to all players and enemies instead of everyone, making it clear that it does not hit Osti. It used to, and now they just changed how that worked in the last patch, and I think followed that up with this change as well. Fixed wording in the statistics, total playtime, fastest when hover tip. Localization, updated translations for various languages, fixed translation errors in the following languages. Not going to read all that, but you can if you, for some reason, are watching this in English and playing a different language. Bug fixes, fixed broken Steam rich presence translations, fixed a crash that could occur on startup after a Steam Cloud sync conflict, fixed a crash that could occur when the game failed to start and tried to show an error dialog, fixed an issue where numbers were improperly formatted on the victory screen. This happened to me a lot, I think, with potion belts and or the boss relic that gives you potion slots. If there's an error while spawning a creature into combat, a placeholder is shown instead of soft locking the combat. Fix soft lock caused by being able to use your controller to confirm a hand card selection while you are peeking. Fix being able to press down arrow to navigate to controller navigate the card grid on upgrade/remove/transform previous up. Vulkan is now defaulted to on Intel i GPUs with known D3, D12 stability issues. Ironclad. Fix soft lock when selecting a card to upgrade by armaments while lethality power still applies. This is only going to happen if you have like the prismatic shard-esque relic, or I guess the event inside of Act 2 that will give you a card selection from Necro, which this is actually relevant. This would end up in your deck, and Necro is the one you want to click the most. So I guess very good that that is fixed. Fixed bullet time card getting played by mayhem power, not setting the cost of the cards in your hand to 0. So I do wonder, because the way that Tanks has a boss relic that says all powers cost 1 more to play, and when you have, for example, a power potion that's supposed to set that to 0, it does cost 1. And I think that's intentional, but I do wonder, like, against certain enemies now, if bullet time is going to actually work correctly. If you're going to have actually an overwrite and set everything to 0 if stuff will still cost 1s. Like, for example, Necrobinder, borrowed time now increases the cost of every card by 1. Can you then play bullet time after? I don't know. I don't know if it's order dependent or if it's just an in-game interaction that we haven't figured out yet. Okay. Potions and relics. Fixed unsettling lamp relic, doubling the strength you get from dominate card. I did know that this existed and it was really, really sick, but I guess they want it to just mean only the debuffs and not the entire effect of the card, which is how Unsettling Lamp actually reads right now. So they might reword that if this is the kind of interaction that they're trying to cut out. If a potion is discarded just before combat ends, it's no longer forever unusable. When clicking a potion that can be thrown at all enemies simultaneously, the potion pop-up now properly says throw instead of drink. Enemies. Fix an issue where a few enemies' damage intents were occasionally showing the wrong number. Fix not being able to navigate from the relic inventory back to the combat in the mysterious night fight on controller. Remove broken text from Thieving Hopper. Enemies escape artist power hover tip when playing in Polish. Fix Soul Nexus animation not playing correctly. Ancients, remove the peek button from the card selection via Niao's Hefty Tablet relic. Effects that occur before your turn now interact correctly with Vaku's Whispering Earring relic. Okay, interesting. So yeah, this is the this is going to be a couple of fixes, and I did know about this next one too that allowed Vaku to continue to play cards after Void form because it ends your turn, but it's Vaku's turn, which is kind of funny. Yeah, I don't know. I think there are some weird ordering things too, because like I had a relic that I bought in a shop that adds 2 0-cost cards from my deck into my hand at the start of combat, and it does not work with backstab. Like it can pick backstab as a valid target instead of backstab already having a innate. I don't know if that is supposed to work like that. Maybe they don't know about it, and maybe that's something I need to point out. But that was kind of annoying, and maybe this is some of the ordering, like before the turn, the layers in order that's supposed to be happening that they're fixing. I don't really know. Fix an issue where Vaku's Lord Parasol relic would occasionally only obtain some of the items that the merchant sells. Fix being able to end the Lord Parasol's purchase animation on controller. That's really funny. So you could like P-Box glitch, I guess, similarly from the first game where you just cancel the animation. Very interesting. Fix an issue where if the player visited a combat style event without actually starting a combat, i.e. choosing return the key at the Lantern Key event and then visited the merchant immediately after, throwing a foul potion at the merchant would not grant the player any gold. Multiplayer, trash to treasure power no longer procs from other players' generated statuses. Fix soft lock and thieving hopper fight if one person is dead when it tries to steal cards. Very funny. Fix state divergence related to driftwood and dreamcatcher relics. Player name is now correctly displayed when hovering over your character. When re-entering the multiplayer host screen, the ascension is now correctly synced, and you can now reload after saving a game at the reward screen with non-standard rewards. So overall, pretty small patch. But again, I do think what they changed is very, very important. To recap, the biggest things. Silent mostly just buffed with Leading Strike change and also with Blade of Ink. Those are just very pickable cards. Untouchable is still very pickable. Speedster is already kind of bad and is just not going to be picked now. Overall, that's just a buff, I think. I'm not really feeling the loss of Speedster at all and just don't really care about that. And the other thing is Skulking Colonies, so Underdogs is a little bit scary now. And also the Door rework. So again, I think Door is going to be much, much harder now with no off time and just kind of demand a better question. I think overall there's going to be a lot of people that are pretty happy about that change, about it just being harder in general. And Borrowed Time, Dance Macabre stocks just way, way up. I don't think I really needed to say very much about that again, but yeah, overall, I think buffs and good changes. I don't know why Silent got help here, but I guess it's going to make it feel like you have an actual Shiv deck instead of just cards that are kind of okay value that maybe let you go into Shivs later. Borrowed Time, quite interesting now, gonna lead to some cool lines, and maybe you pick it more often now with something like Reap in the deck and let you cheese out some stuff. Your title can actually be new Door. Yeah, they're still trying to figure it out. I think Door will be very hard now, and we'll go ahead and fight that or try to play a run here or continue the streak. Very interesting overall. The remove cost increase is going to be a huge deal for the game overall. I think that's probably the thing that's going to be felt the most alongside the Door changes. We will see how that actually affects us going forward, or if that even sticks. But that is definitely a much harsher change than the old Ascension 6. I expect you to really not be able to remove more than like once or twice per run, maybe 3 times, excluding getting them in events. Okay, well, I think that's it for the patch rundown. Thanks for watching, YouTube viewers, and we will see you next week for the same deal.